А тепер я з задоволенням запрошую.
And now let me invite to the stage our moderator Ksenia Orinchak, founder and executive director of the National Association of Extractive Industries of Ukraine, who knows not everything but almost everything about the subsoil and minerals. Good morning, dear co-organizers, dear colleagues, dear participants and speakers. You have already seen this video about Ukraine being a very rich country, rich in resources, but for 33 years we were not able to manage these resources the way we wanted. So let me invite the panelists. Alona Shkrum, the First Deputy Minister of Development of Communities and Territories. Yanis Aizelnieks, Team Leader for Socio-Economic Policy Team in the European Commission. William Thompson, Head of the Eurasia Division of the OECD. Please welcome. Frank de Rosier, Assistant Deputy Minister for Energy Efficiency and Technology in Canada. Arvid Turkner, the Managing Director for Ukraine and Moldova in EBRD. Thank you, and we are about to start. So I will ask the questions in English. Well, they have been written in English, but I will read them aloud in Ukrainian. So while we're waiting for Madam Shkrum, let us start with Yanis. Sir, can you tell us about how you are implementing the CRM Act, which is a specific regulation made in the EU a year or two ago? Please specify. And so how does this act work in Europe now, and are we ready to implement it in our country, given that since 2021 we have this signed document between the memorandum between the EU and Ukraine, memorandum on this critical raw materials, and we know the situation is really intense now, and Ukraine could have become this island that could have helped the European Union in these matters of embargoes with China.
Can you hear me well? I hope so. It's a tremendous pleasure to address you today in this very important conversation for the European Commission. It's our pleasure to contribute to development and discussing this sector. I think the questions are extremely pertinent from the Commission side, and I think it's also very timely and necessary discussion on the subsoil wealth of Ukraine, its potential for investment, attraction, and steps that need to be taken in order to unlock the optimal possibilities that this sector can provide. I wanted indeed to stop on two elements. The first element is what's happening at the moment inside Europe in this area on the policy making and how this is going to implicate Ukraine. And then secondly, of course, how the EU is supporting Ukraine in addressing and transforming its critical raw materials sector. So, first of all, I think the most important element is that the EU has adopted its Critical Raw Material Act. And that happened a bit more than 1 year ago. And since then, we have been developing our systems and work to put it in practice. It is a regulation which is then directly applicable to the EU member states, and it establishes a regulatory framework to ensure a secure and sustainable supply of the CRMs in Europe. This Critical Raw Materials Act is the basis for building up the EU capacities in this very unsure and changing times to ensure there's a resilience for the supply chains that are necessary for very critical sectors of our economy. Obviously, it includes measures that are directed at how we can support development and security of this sector inside EU. And also, there is a very important component: how do we cooperate with the rest of the world, with all the countries that are producing critical raw materials, and that also includes Ukraine. But I must say that with Ukraine, it's more than cooperation with the rest of the world, because we need to also factor in that Ukraine is an EU candidate country, and it is a future EU member state. So there is a much more deeper going and a much more significant element in our upcoming cooperation. So as I said, this European Critical Raw Material Act aims to strengthen the EU's critical raw materials capacities along the whole value chain. It also aims to increase our resilience, and it has certain objectives that we have put forward, such as reducing dependencies, such as increasing preparedness, and promoting supply chain sustainability and circularity. It has set out 4 pillars along which it's going to function, and first of them is setting up clear priorities. So what do we need to do? And I'll come back to that. There is a specific pillar on addressing building European capacities, so we need to work on increasing our capacity to deliver, improving resilience, and investing in research and innovation with skills and sustainability in mind. So this is something which is hugely important for the green and digital transition. This act identifies a list of critical raw materials. So we have identified or defined 34 critical and 17 strategic minerals that we are looking at it here. And of course, this list can change, and it is varying from country to country. As I said, it also defines objectives, where we are going. So we need to achieve objectives of 10% of the annual consumption should be sourced in the EU, at least 40% should be processed inside the EU, and at least 25% should come from recycling. This is something where we are heading. And this includes obligations to member states, creating national exploration plans and simplifying permitting. So this is something that also is up for the agenda of member states to do. How we are implementing, as I said, will be then looked through the strategic projects. And in order to move ahead with concrete implementation, this summer, European Commission announced the list of 13 projects outside Europe. Yes, so 13 non-EU strategic projects under Critical Raw Material Act. This complements the recent designation of 47 projects inside the EU. So that's the whole package that we have now adopted. And, this also says that what kind of amount we can manage to source inside Europe, and it also tells about the significant quantity that we need to look for in cooperation with countries outside the EU. So these non-EU projects will be key to strengthening Europe's access to responsibly sourced raw materials, critical for green transition and digital technologies and defense. Balahievka graphite extraction project run by the BGV group is one of these 13 recognized projects.
It's more strategic projects and more important.
Absolutely. This is a strategic project, and it is something where European Commission will give more visibility to these projects, will facilitate and support these projects. It is not necessarily with this status that comes directly funding. So we will be then working on the next stage, and I will come also to how we can practically support from the EU side these projects. So joint development of this project, as well as other identified activities, will give our strategic partnership new dynamics, which could then bring added value to Ukraine, strengthen value chain integration efforts, and contribute to the reconstruction through the value it brings. The Commission launched a second call of strategic projects on critical raw materials by supporting initiatives that boost domestic production. And the cutoff date for submission of these projects is 15th of January next year. So we're looking forward to submission of the project proposals in this area. So how do we support Ukraine, and how our partnership works at the moment?
How implementation for this?
Absolutely, how we look at it. So we have a number of tools at our disposal. First of all, I mean, the largest tool to support Ukraine is Ukraine Facility, and this is a 50 billion euro program that consists of several pillars. Largest of this program is Ukraine Plan with 39 billion euros, where Commission is supporting Ukraine going through reforms and funding these reforms. Ukraine Plan has a number of chapters outlining reforms, and one of these chapters is in the area of critical raw materials, and it lists 6 specific reforms that we are working on and which European Commission is then financing through Ukraine Plan. The objective of these reforms are to support further development of the CRM sector in line with economic and sustainability objectives, and it focuses on improving transparency, strategic planning and administrative procedures. So, for example, one of the reforms that are included in the Ukraine Plan for critical raw materials sector includes setting up e-cabinet for subsoil users. So this is making information on mineral resources more transparent and accessible, and this reform improves the speed and cost efficiency and predictability of investment decisions. So this is something that is already done. As part of the next payment from the Commission side, under Ukraine Plan, Ukraine should publish and make available to investors a report verifying its critical raw material reserves based on the UN framework classification for resources. So this, of course, is necessary to make sure that that there is accurate estimation, and that there is that we are taking into account social, actual, geological, and all other aspects in line with the current methodology for estimation of the reserves. Another reform that is envisaged is in the area of environmental, social, and governance aspects. Ukraine, by the end of the year, has to produce and publish a study for the mining and extractive sector outlining recommendations to address existing legislative gaps. So certainly ESG standards is high on the EU agenda. We want to support mining that is responsible, and that is also in line with the objectives that we would like to see in this area. What other financial means are there from the European Union side? Ukraine Facility has also its investment side, so investment framework, and this investment framework has 9.5 billion euro de-risking capital, which can support projects in de-risking with multiple programs eligible for CRM investments. This includes loans and equity guarantees and collaboration with the partner financial institutions, placing EU firmly at the center of large-scale reconstruction efforts. And there we work very closely through this program with all the IFIs and EBRDs on this panel. We work very, very closely through the investment framework. One of such programs is also upcoming European flagship fund for reconstruction of Ukraine. So this fund is also going to provide catalytic equity capital from the key investors to mobilize private equity capital in meeting the sizable financing needs in this area. You know, European Union had signed a strategic partnership with Ukraine a few years ago. We had implemented the first 2-year program. We have designed the second 2-year program, which is ready to be signed and is already actually in part under implementation. We certainly will continue this partnership, which is mutually beneficial for Ukraine and for the EU, in order to both ensure economic wealth and prosperity and our objectives of the digital green transition. Ukraine is a candidate country and future EU member state. And Ukraine is working towards alignment its policies and legislation with the EU. So this work is well underway, and it will include implementation of Critical Raw Materials Act and its objectives, therefore strengthening resilience and critical raw material supply chains in Ukraine and Europe. Thank you.
Дякую вам, пане Янісу. Слухайте, дуже багато роботи ведеться.
Thank you, Mr. Yanis. A lot of work is done. I can confirm that from the side of our association, because we have a constant cooperation with the European Commission in the direction of implementation of CRM Act, Critical Raw Material Act, in the implementation in Ukrainian legislation. We will support that. And besides of that, we have a general policy with Critical Material Act. And I would like to ask a question, Madame Alona, First Deputy Minister for Development of Communities and Territories of Ukraine. Madame Alona, good day. Today, a subject of renewal of Ukrainian infrastructure is not only a technical but a strategical question of development of regions. And I would like to ask you how Ministry sees a role of local resources, mining and construction sectors in particular, in long-term strategy of rebuilding country, because we just heard Mr. Yanis about a general policy for implementation and development of CRM in Ukraine is done, but we have certain questions about communities, how they see that, how it will look. It would be great to hear an answer from you. Thank you.
Friends, it's a great honor to take part in today's discussion, and thank you for for trying to find gender balance on the different sides of the panel in this discussion. I think it deserves it. Well, basically, when we are speaking about Ukraine, regions, communities, and mineral wealth, we must look beyond the resources themselves. We are not the ministry that is managing those resources. We are the Ministry of Hard Projects, Infrastructure, Transport, Logistics, Housing, and reconstruction in general. So when we look at those resources, we think that we have a task to take them into the global economy through logistics, through infrastructure, through the roads, through the railways, through the airports, and they will become available soon. I know that, and I believe that, and through international partnerships. So basically, we possess a large number of critical minerals essential for the global energy transition, as you know. And I'm sure this discussion, was heard today. But the resources alone, they are not an investment themselves. They value something when there is an infrastructure that connects the extraction to the global markets, right? So this is our task mainly, modernizing this infrastructure, doing the new logistical corridors, strengthening the existing logistical corridors, and recovering them, rebuilding them, reconstructing them, and protecting them from shellings, from bombs, from drones, from blackouts, from everything that Russia throws at us. And we are only able to do that together with the partners that are sitting here at the panel already. Arvid from UKRAINIan, a great friend who is doing right now for us a number of concessions of the ports together with IFC, a number of possible concession in the roads through the pipeline of road sector. And we are talking about many, many more. Concession of the airports is also on the table, even though there is no airport opening up, but we are preparing to do that, and we are preparing those projects. And I know that there are many of you in the audience and in this forum who are interested in those conflict projects. So my job and our job in the ministry is to do that as efficient, transparent, fast, and understandable for investors as possible. And we here very much count on the IFIs, on the help of the different partners and countries, European Union, obviously, and a lot of other investment, private equity funds, and et cetera, as well. So for us, it's the process of resources, processing, logistics, and export. We are right now implementing large-scale projects that physically integrate our country into the European logistic. In 2024, we have officially were included in the TNT networks, which connects our railway routes through key European corridors, the North Sea Baltic, the Baltic Black Sea Aegean Sea, and the Mediterranean Rhine-Danube. And all of those regions are strategic important for us. When Russia, for example, blocked the Ukrainian ports in the Black Sea, we were only able to export something through the Danube ports and through the railway system. So, we understand more than anybody the importance of logistics and the importance of differentiating this logistics. We are also counting very much on EBRD. I'm sorry, I'm mentioning you too often on the strategy for Danube region, because this region has an incredible potential, starting from logistics to tourism to the ports, but really needs reinventing itself at some point. And the war surprisingly helped actually this reinvention. So those crises, they push you very hard and push you to your limits. And this is something that we face right now in Ukraine, but it also opened up incredible opportunities. We are also building new cross-border points, so modern border crossings, the new investment gateway into the countries. We are doing that with at the Polish border, with all of our neighbors' border except Belarus and Russia. And obviously, this is the first thing that business sees when it comes into Ukraine, that experts see. We are building new service zones, new bridges projects, new connection projects, new terminal, and etc., etc. We are looking into those crossings as investment hubs as well. We are also working on the new projects for European railway line. And I am super proud that just recently we were able to open new European railway to Uzhgorod and Chop. Just for your understanding, Ukrainian railway is a Soviet Union one, so it's different from the European one. And notwithstanding the war, notwithstanding all of the challenges, the shelling, the bombs, the lack of resources, we were able to open this first European railway to Uzhgorod, which will become and is already becoming a hub with direct trains to Bratislava, to all of the neighboring countries, to Vienna, and to many other logistic hubs. And now we are working for this year and for the next year to open the same line in 2 years to Lviv and Mostysk, which would be another hub. So I mean, there are quite a lot of things going on in this area. And when we talk about the new investment platform for mineral deals, the Ukraine-US mineral deals agreement, obviously the processing and logistics is incredibly important. In a conclusion, I will just say that we are quite open for investment. The time to invest is now. So many businesses have already shown the example of investing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars and euros in Ukraine after the full-scale invasion. And I think that those companies and their action and their presence here today speak much louder than any words that I can say. We see a huge potential in mineral resources, but also in modern infrastructure network and logistics. And together with your help, we are building not the roads, actually, not the bridges, not the cross-border points, but our common hope, our common resilience, our common export and import, and our common future. Thanks.
Дякую, пані Альона, але все ж таки є уточнення.
Thank you, Alona, but I would like to check something. Since you're in charge of this element of working with the communities and territories, we have those resources in different regions. And this matter of tariffs in the Ukrainian railways, this tariffs for power supply, it affects those costs of that sphere of minerals. So how do you work in terms of that to engage, to attract those investments, to clear those investment barriers in the regions? Because no matter which international treaties we sign with the US, the EBRR, the EBRD, and other organizations, the investor will make their financial plan and have to understand what they will face in future and how attractive investment in Ukraine is.
You're absolutely right. There are no easy questions, no easy answer on that. We have Ukrainian Railways, an independent company governed by a governing board, an independent board, but we are doing a coordination councils on those kind of questions together with Ukrainian Railway and port authorities. So we need to stop those disbalances. And unfortunately, in Ukraine, the regions and communities right now are very different in their capacities and different in their financial possibilities and limits. So for us, it's super important also to work as a European Union, imperative to stop those disbalancing of the system. And it's also very important that the part of the rent of using the mineral resources goes to the local budgets, right, and goes to the local communities. At least, for example, 5% of the rent of oil and gas goes to the local budgets and local communities. So obviously we are the ministry that is not only responsible for infrastructure but regions and territories. And the important thing right now, the priority, is to have more incentives, more possibilities and more money for the frontline regions, or how we call it borderline regions, which have more than 75% of all of the destructions. So we need to avoid those discrepancies. Doesn't matter whether the war continues or the war stops tomorrow, those discrepancies will be there. And obviously the task is to invest in those regions, to reconstruct those regions. They have 75% of all of the destructions. They have 13% of housing destroyed. People want to come back there, but sometimes it's difficult to do that. So the whole policy in this area should look into that. You're right. Thank you.
Дякую. І крайнє питання до вас.
Thank you. And the last question, if I may. The thing is that somehow in our regions, since we deal with this raising awareness, professional awareness of our citizens. We explain them what that mining is, recovery sector is, and we face that those residents, they are skeptical about those potential investors who will come and do something in the region. Does the ministry work with that, deal with that? Does the ministry explain to those residents that this is not the agricultural business, that these investors, they will bring another level of jobs, of industrialization of the region, and those investments will bring more opportunities. Maybe we can even make this program for return of those Ukrainians if they understand that in certain regions where there are raw materials, later on some factories will be built, the added value will be made. So do you work on such raising awareness campaigns in regions?
Of course we do, but I think that I do not agree that there is skepticism or limited awareness on that. I actually think that the landscape is changing very, very much. It depends on the local authorities, it depends on the mayors, it depends on the countries that come and businesses from which countries come. We have incredible examples, and I think that the case here is to actually show the success stories and show the success stories to the whole communities of Ukraine. And then, you know, Ukrainian psychology is very easy in this way. When your neighboring region, when your neighboring mayor has a successful investment from Denmark, Germany, Polish or Austria, you start to work much harder than any kind of political presentation, political leadership or political words can persuade you to do. So, for example, I'm responsible as well for energy efficiency, and there was huge skepticism even a number of years ago about taking credit money to do energy efficiency on public buildings, school, kindergartens, hospitals. And then even when there were blackouts, cities were reluctant. Some of those cities are here today. But then when some of the cities had started those programs, has taken credit money, has received some kind of small grants in those credit money, has installed solar panels, and then they've had kindergarten that in previous winter was 5 degrees warmer than any other kindergarten in the region. And now we have cities here present in our community zone that have 20 kindergarten, schools and hospitals already renovated. Then all of the neighboring communities near them started to do the same. I think it will be the same with all of the other sectors. We have amazing examples of cooperation of specific business and specific countries in specific borderline regions. For example, Mykolaiv, a very difficult region, constantly shelled, lost a lot of people, lost a lot of industries. But Denmark leadership in this sector and Denmark businesses in agriculture, and not just agriculture, actually showed amazing results, amazing projects. And I think that everyone in Mykolaiv is right now not skeptical about that because they felt it. Estonia's support in Zhytomyr region also changed a lot. Lithuania's work in Kiev region, when you come to Borodyanka, which was a city that was, you know, black, destroyed, burned out, And now it's 75% rebuilt with the help of donors and with our work and our work of our agency. And now you come there and there is a super beautiful modern lithium done by Lithuania, a common project. No member of Borodyanka or Kiev region could be skeptical about that. And this is not just about help or donations, this is about business projects and business opportunities. And we have the same Germany and France contribution in Chernigiv. We have other businesses. So the more success stories there are, the more we need to showcase them together. And then I think that it speaks much more than any kind of our communication campaign.
Дякую. Але ми все ж
Thank you, but since now we're talking about the mining sector, so let's focus on that. So thank you, Alona, and we actually as an association, we can help you in developing those programs, because this skepticism, this is the reality in fact. Because, well, I read different polls that, for example, people don't understand what graffiti is, whether it's connected to uranium, etc. So this raising awareness is needed. And now let's move to the William Thompson. So I would like to ask you about those global supply chains and the role of Ukraine, as well as priorities and possibilities that your organization can suggest in ensuring this global sustainability.
This seems to be working, which is good. It's a great pleasure to be here and join this discussion. I actually want to start by thanking the Deputy Minister for her emphasis on connectivity, because one thing I would point out is that as an organization, the OECD is working on critical minerals and critical raw materials framework policies across the world, not only in Ukraine, Central Asia, Africa, Latin America, and in all of those contexts, that work is in parallel with work we do on trade and transport connectivity, much of it in partnership with the International Transport Forum, which is part of the OECD kind of family, and with the International Energy Agency. But it's really critical because developing these sectors is going to require us to rethink a lot of our transport and logistics networks. It's not something that is simply going to bolt neatly onto what we have built hitherto. I'm very conscious of the time, looking at my watch. So let me just describe a bit about what we're doing with Ukraine and with other countries. In fact, we have already had several rounds of discussions with the ministry on Ukraine's evolving critical minerals strategy. I had a meeting where we discussed this in some depth 2 days ago with Deputy Minister Perelikhin. And we're really impressed with what we see coming forward. From an OECD perspective, all of this work sits within a broader horizontal initiative that spans 5 continents, which is the OECD initiative on critical minerals for sustainable growth and development. And it reflects the range of issues we have to address. And I just want to highlight a few of them and perhaps suggest some policy lessons very, very briefly. The first, also following on from the discussion of regional development, maybe not the one that comes to most people's minds first, but I used to work on regional and rural development at the OECD, and at that time we created a network of mining regions, which still exists and which has great potential in this sphere and is very active, precisely because of this challenge that the subsoil is the sovereign's, so locals shouldn't just capture all of those economic rents, but the development of the subsoil always has extremely severe, both positive and negative local spillovers. These have to be managed. Local communities have to know that they are winning. And as someone who's been working with Central Asian countries on this, I can tell you now, it may seem like one of those very woke ESG headaches that you'd rather think about later when you're racing ahead with your investment project. It's not. If you generate antagonism of local communities, you will face a backlash, and you will discover, as others are learning, that actually engaging them properly, thinking these things through ahead of time pays off. The same is true in respect to some other areas that we work on. One is linked to ESG. One is the work on management of environmental risks, which goes hand in hand, honestly, with that local engagement, because many of the environmental risks associated with these developments are very local in their impact, issues about water tables, contamination, and so on. And this is something I know that Ukraine is thinking about very carefully, because there's a lot of legacy issues still from the Soviet period that have to be addressed. And I hope my neighbor to my right will be happy to hear that one of the things they've looked at very closely and really like is the tailings management protocol of Canada, which they see as a very good model. along with other instruments to help not only address the environmental problems of tailings, but also to realize some of the economic benefits that are there. We work also on capacity building with state-owned enterprises and around issues to do with competitive and transparent buyer selection procedures, structuring of projects, and so on. But I think what I really want to dwell on, because I am watching the clock, is also the work we are doing on tax. The OECD Center for Tax Policy and Administration is working very intensively with a large number of countries around these issues. The development of the subsoil creates enormous headaches for tax authorities. On the one hand, you want a framework that is conducive to investment, that is attractive to investors who can come and work and reap normal profit. On the other hand, the potential for transfer pricing, particularly in really complex value chains like critical minerals. This isn't like piped gas or crude oil. This is the level of processing creates tremendous opportunities for abuse of transfer pricing procedures, for departure from market mechanisms. And so we've been working very intensively to help ensure, on the one hand, an attractive investment environment, but on the other hand, we want to make sure that the sovereign's property rights are respected and that the country does receive the benefits it should receive. That's linked to an ongoing discussion with Ukraine, and we discussed this with the Deputy Minister 2 days ago, and other countries on investment incentives. Particularly given Ukraine's current situation, we can see the need for some reliance on very specific incentives. I could talk about this for hours, and you'll be very happy to know that I have no intention to. I just want to say 3 things. The first is they should be oriented very much towards the cost side rather than the income side, particularly if they are fiscal incentives. Anything you do that helps to reduce the upfront costs of the projects, accelerated depreciation, duty-free import of equipment, and so on, is far more desirable to help generate new activities than corporate tax holidays, VAT holidays, measures like this that basically will encourage a lot of tax planning and generate enormous deadweight losses without necessarily triggering new investment. The second point is to realize that very often infrastructure challenges, and that brings me back to the Deputy Minister's pitch, infrastructure challenges matter more to investors in many contexts than the tax arrangements. You can give them really sweet fiscal deals, but if the infrastructure is not there or is not of sufficient quality, you are in trouble. The third point, there are many more one could make. The third point, though, is that, and this is why cost-based incentives work better, you want these to be incentives that you are able to phase out as the project matures. No investor ever got tired of having a profit tax holiday or a VAT holiday, right? You give it to him for 5 years, he's immediately pushing to extend it as the 5-year deadline approaches to make it 10. And I've seen this firsthand in multiple countries, where one country I was at what they regarded as a terribly successful project, but the tax holidays were in their 13th year, having been offered for 5. Whereas cost-based incentives, because they really focus on those big upfront costs, capital investment at the beginning of a new project, naturally tend to diminish in importance. And it's 1:15, I stopped there. I promised myself I wouldn't go past 6 minutes. Thank you very much.
Дякую. Дякую, пане Вільяме. Дякую. Але справа...
Thank you, Mr. William. But the thing is that in Ukraine, the stimulus for this sector of the minerals is not there. So we can't name any incentives right now to develop the mining sector. Maybe you know something more that I don't know.
These are very much under discussion, but I would have to say I have worked with Ukraine as an OECD official since the middle of the 2000s. I first went to Ukraine in the 80s, but I first went to Ukraine as an OECD official after the Orange Revolution. I've been through several rounds of attempts to use tax incentives to generate investment or to direct investment to specific
Ні, ми зараз говоримо не тільки про податки.
No, now it's not only the taxes.
It's not a happy history, and so we want to make sure that the incentives put in place now, which we've discussed since 2023 with the authorities, will be the sort that help to generate genuine new investment in new activities in a responsible way.
Thank you, Mr. William. And very logically, we can go to Mr. Arvid Turkner, Managing Director for Ukraine and Moldova EBRD. Here it's about a bit about incentives, but international organizations like yourself, to what extent can help to increase Ukraine's capacity to restore after the war. We know that members of our association, Carpatsko-Żerella company, sign a contract with you for crediting and development of country. Yeah, thank you.
I hope you can hear me well. So, look, a lot has been said already about the right policies and conditionality from the European Union, about the important standards and experience OECD shares, and of course how important infrastructure is to connect minerals to the markets and actually make it viable projects. So for us, as a financing partner, that's exactly what we can bring, the financing and applying all these policies and standards, which we think are incredibly important to make it a viable contribution to sustainable recovery and long-term growth in Ukraine. So, of course, EBRD is not alone. I can say that other IFIs are also investing and DFIs. I see colleagues from DFC here, and the US-Ukraine Reconstruction Investment Fund is, of course, a very important vehicle in this area, and we are very much looking forward to jointly invest in the sector. So, as EBRD, we are an experienced investor. We have invested more than 3 billion in the broader region, not only Ukraine, in the minerals and mining sector. So we have some experience, and we also have some principles along which we invest. So everything which furthers and advances the green transition is important to us, but also very important is that we want to develop responsible practices and, of course, strengthen governance. So, the importance of ESG principles has just been stressed very much. Especially in Ukraine, I think there's a large potential for minerals which will be critical to the green and digital transition. And I want to mention two examples. One is already very well known because we signed a mandate letter and are currently in due diligence stage with BGV for the graphite project, which has been mentioned. And that's important, and it is advancing well. And we are also in due diligence stage for a polymetallic project that's an expansion. I cannot mention the name of the investment yet, but it is advancing, and we are very happy that there's more than one. So, whenever we engage in a mining and minerals operation, we want to make sure the practices are right. So we are looking at decarbonization, we are looking at digitalization, making everything more efficient. I want to give you an example from Turkey. So we invested in a large polymetallic mine, an expansion project, Balia, and we electrified the mining operations. And when I say electrifying, of course, we are looking at renewables. And we are also having a large social program targeting skills training for youth and women, which I think is a very important point to make it beneficial to the local community, as has just been stressed. So these are the kind of things we want to do in Ukraine as well. So replicate these comprehensive models, taking all aspects into account. And now coming just to one point on the policy. As a development bank, of course, we also want to advance the market. And here we are working very closely with the EU on a project which is about digitalizing the existing geodata. So we are working with the Ukraine Geology Service and creating a nice portal to make this data accessible. The data is still the data which we have, and it might not always be the recent classification, and at times it is old, but let's at least make it accessible so everyone can see what's there and what else needs to be done and how we can improve. So I stop here.
Дякую. А підкажіть, будь ласка.
Thank you. And can you advise about a JUMP program? the memorandum that you signed with BGV Group, you applied a program jump towards it, right? If so, if you can tell us what is this program, because what we know, it is a program of support for young miners who only want to start mining, receive a permit, and develop their project, so that this project can develop until 20 years. If you can tell more details, thank you.
So this the JUMP program, which is a junior mining program, is something which we are for the first time implementing with BGV. And the thinking is very simple. So usually we have been investing, or the more standard investment is a maybe greenfield mine, but post-feasibility, or an expansion of an already existing operation. And this is where most financing partners would come in, because you have more certainty and visibility on the project. So now we realize, in order to accelerate early stage mining, we need financing there as well. And here the tools are more equity or equity type of investments, and that's something we can do under this specific program. So it's a 150 million euro envelope, but of course it can be expanded once it is used up. And we hope that we will very much engage in early stage, more risky investments, but accelerate the processing for the long term, as you said.
Дякую. А стосовно
Thank you. And about the clarification, BGV is a big company that has 13 licenses or so for critical resources mining. Since they are such a big company, is there a gradation? What are the criteria who can turn to you in Ukraine? Because as far as I know, this company works on the territory of European Union, and this memorandum with BGV is in fact a first sign in this direction. Polymetallic projects are very big projects. Are there any criteria for those junior miners in Ukraine in water or constructing materials can apply to you? What are the criteria? What is the threshold? Thank you. We will leave Ms. Alona. Thank you very much.
The criteria are the ones you would expect from basically any business project, right? It needs to be a sponsor which has some financial strengths, which has relevant sector experience. We need to have a project in a business case which has a good prospect. We are extremely carefully looking at integrity and reputational aspects. So we want to make sure we know exactly who we are working with, and that business practices and business reputation is at a very high level. So these are the things which really apply to any project.
Дякую. Тому що не знаю, чи ви в курсі.
Thank you, because I'm not sure if you know, but 2 years ago in Ukraine there was a law 2805 about a norm that every license is an asset. So next step in Ukrainian legislation would be logical, that in banking system to open a credit line similar to JUMP program, do you think you can integrate it with these new norms, with new standards, since licensors in Ukraine are now an asset? So JUMP program can actually cover all mining sector in Ukraine.
I think there's a lot which needs to be improved and streamlined in the licensing and permitting area as well. Currently we have different standards. We have a lot of dormant licenses which are not helpful, because projects are not developing and they're kind of blocked for maybe willing investors. So I would be very happy to have a dialogue together with other partners and the government, how we can advance the processes here and make sure more investors have a chance to actually invest.
Добре, дякую вам дуже.
Good, thank you very much. Now I would like to go to you, Frank de Rozier, Assistant Deputy Minister, Energy Efficiency and Technology. So approach of Canada to form a list of critically important minerals, because you are an example in the world. So you have very dynamic list. And can you say more about principles and methodology that Canada uses to identify critical, and how often you revise this list? And what kind of factors, economical dependency, risks of supply, or give you the basis for a reconsideration? It's very important for us to hear for Ukraine.
Thank you so much for the question, and quite a pleasure and honor to be here with such a distinguished group of panelists. Before maybe answering the question, if I may, I thought maybe taking a moment to give you a bit of sense of broader context in terms of how Canada is positioning itself vis-à-vis Ukraine writ large. As some of you may know, we've had a federal election not long ago, this past spring, where we had a returning government led by Prime Minister Carney. And as it's the case for any new government, people always wonder, will there be continuation in terms of Canada's foreign policy and priorities writ large? And just maybe to convey that this is clearly the case, Canada's steadfast supports for Ukraine's sovereignty and economic development remains extraordinarily strong and present across all party lines across all the country. And so is our financial assistance. We've provided to date over $22 billion, the highest contribution per capita of the G7, and will carry on in that support. And that leadership is not just present in bilateral dealings in mining, as we'll discuss, but also more generally, including during Canada's chairmanship of the G7. So we welcome G7 leaders back in June. Again, energy and environment ministers 2 weeks ago in Toronto, and foreign affairs ministers are just meeting this week. And in every case, Ukraine is one of the core topics of discussions, and this is deliberate on our part, as we want to keep that focus there. Interestingly, another topic that was core to all of those discussions is critical minerals, which has been one of the central key commitments made by G7 leaders and their ministers. And you'll see, again, a number of initiatives carry on from this over the coming months, as there's very strong desire to diversify supply chain away from China and Russia in this particular instance. Why is Canada putting such emphasis on mining? We are a large mining nation. We are humble by nature, but there's a few things we do really well. High sake is one of them. Mining and energy is another sectors where we really excel. We have a large number of firms involved. Maybe just to share two stats with you. The first one is the total assets of Canadian mining companies. It's $337 billion, two-thirds of which is outside Canada. So about $220 billion of investments in Latin America, in Africa, in Europe, and Asia. So we're naturally inclined to do business around the world and in challenging operating environment. So doing business in a country like Ukraine does not scare us. We're used to operate in such contexts. And the second data point I would share is 40%. 40% is the proportion of publicly listed mining and exploration companies who are globally or based in Canada of the entire world. So it gives you a sense of the sheer scale and bench strength that we have in this particular domain. To your question on critical minerals, so we deliberately developed a comprehensive strategy along with many of our G7 partners on critical minerals. Developing the list was one of those core commitments because our companies and investors want to know where is Canada focusing. So we have this list of 27, 28 elements, which we update to your question. We don't have a set time frame, but typically in practice it's been every 18 months or so based on the market evolution, discussion with provinces and territories, investors, and our G7 partners. It has really helped us focus our investment dollars, our tax measures as well, and making sure that we also assign the proper infrastructure expenditures to get those products to markets. Canada is a large country, so having the rails and the ports and all this there is important. We've invested over $4 billion just in terms of direct expenditures, and more investments will be coming in that space. I thought that I would perhaps close by commenting about some industry-specific projects with Ukraine. So I mentioned the junior mining companies are so many and active. So we spoke to them and said, what is it that you would need to invest in Ukraine? And say, we know our business, we know the technology, we have all the manpower to do it. That's not the issue. The issue that they had, and it was referenced by two of our panelists earlier, is basic geological data in terms of where the resource is. And there the information is very sparse and uneven, some of it dated, some of it incomplete. So we've been partnering with the Geological Survey of Ukraine, working to this day very closely with them to do that mapping. Some of it can be done using remote sensing capacities. Some of it requires on-the-ground presence by Ukraine experts. And we're quite encouraged by this groundwork that will take some time, but is essential in order to get those mining investments.
Можна уточню в контексті.
Can I just check something? I would like to check something in context. So we have the information, but it's just outdated because this information dates back to 60s, 70s, to Soviet times. So we have the information. Indeed, we don't have the maps, we don't have the scale, but we need to re-verify this geological data and the experience of Canada. I think that now we're talking more about this geological research works, because digitalization is one thing. We have about only 30% of the information in digital format, but 70% is just on paper. So these are usual paper protocols or maps, lots of paper. So I'd like to check here, is my understanding correct? Are you talking about digitalization or the geological research?
It's both. And there's also a fair amount of information that is in Russian, who also needs to be translated. But a lot of the data need to be updated based on latest standards, latest technologies, and digitized, to your point. And this is groundwork. It's something we've done extensively in many jurisdictions around the world. So we know how to do this on a large scale, but it takes time and effort. And the commitment on the Ukraine government side and Canada and our partners is very much there to do this foundational work. And maybe just to close, in terms of the Deputy Minister was speaking about the desire to have concrete projects on the ground. So just 2 weeks ago, on the margins of the G7 Energy and Environment Ministerial meeting, Canada did announce a $14 million investments in a project in Canada in graphite, for battery-grade graphite. And the kicker there is that we had a Ukrainian company involved in this project, Thermal and Material Engineering Center, and a US partner as well. So the three countries are, in effect, teaming up on this to develop this very critical material that is used for battery, of course, but also for defense, aerospace, and many other applications. And we are pursuing other projects of this type. And maybe just to note, if some of the colleagues in the audience wants to pursue those mining deals, the world's largest mining conference is happening every year in Toronto. It's in early March, March 1st to the 4th. And we have over 30,000 participants, mining companies, investors from around the planet, and would very much welcome Ukrainian firms there.
Дякую. Дякую. Я б
Thank you, and I would like to hear some details about your tax loan, tax credit for this research of minerals. Mineral exploration tax credit, it's called. And the system, how important are those mechanisms for supporting this supply chain? And in your opinion, what is the most important lesson that Ukraine should listen to create its own capital market for young geological research companies? Because now our budget doesn't involve money for this geological research works. In the next year, we'll have almost 200 million hryvnia for this. So, but this will be about $5 million next year. But it's only just about the making one well for Naftogaz, or the works on just one deposit of minerals. So it's not enough, and now we're working on creating of these companies in Ukraine, and so we're wondering about your experience in this.
The geological work is being done based on public funds. But we do harness the data that exploration companies are doing around the country. And we have central depository of all those samples. And we digitize this information so that everybody can access those. It does require an expense, for sure. But the payback is extremely compelling in Canada's case. And I would submit probably the same for Ukraine. To your question on the mineral exploration tax credit, yes, incentive are key, and we heard it from our colleague from the OECD. Competitive for sure, clear, also key. The third one I would emphasize probably the most for many jurisdictions we deal with is stability. We've seen this happening in Africa, we've seen this happening in Latin America, where changing administration come and go, and it is their prerogative, of course, to change their tax regime. But from the investor's perspective, who is looking for a significant payback over a long time period, people don't invest in mining assets for a 1 or 2 year project. We're talking decades. It is really unsettling when suddenly the rules of the game change meaningfully. So I would certainly encourage Ukraine to look at the competitive landscape and make sure that they come up with some clear tax position, but really paying attention to being stable over a long time period and being credible in that way is really, really key to attract those investors who have many other jurisdictions to consider.
Так, ми розуміємо це, але ми не зупиняємось навіть попри військові.
Yes, we understand that, and we don't stop even despite the ongoing war. But I have two more questions, and the most questions are for you somehow. So the question about uranium. Canada is the first level producer with respect to the quality standards. Ukraine has deposits of uranium and has the biggest fleet of nuclear power stations, which makes this uranium critical for the security. Given those supply chains for nuclear fuel, how does Canada see this potential for cooperation with such partners as Ukraine? We hope that will be a more reliable partner after the war, and also the potential for some common intelligence and research in this cycle.
Yeah, Ukraine has strengths. Nuclear is one of them. You have a deep pool of talent and operational expertise in nuclear operations. I was meeting with some Polish officials yesterday who are, again, looking up to Ukraine to help them in that regard. And moving away from Russian supply of uranium is a no-brainer from a geopolitical perspective, not just for Ukraine, by the way, but for all of us, Western nations, who do not want to maintain that dependence. Canada has large supply of uranium, large amount of expertise, and we're the core provider through Cameco, one of the world's largest producer and exporter of uranium, to Ukraine, which is a wonderful arrangement, cutting off supply from Russia entirely. So I was actually with Cameco and Ukraine officials in Toronto 2 weeks ago discussing this very collaboration. So there's an ongoing discussion both around resource identification, but also to do enrichment of uranium here. So we're actually quite encouraged with the potential to advance uranium projects here in Ukraine. You have both the resource and the expertise to do that. Obviously, the war would have to end for this to happen, but we already have the partnership in place to make that occur.
Дякую.
Thank you, and hopefully even despite the war, we'll be getting ready, prepared for making this partnership stronger. And the last question to you, if I may, about disengaging those big investments. They require transparency, stability, and good fiscal regime. Canada has a mature regime of payments, of rents. That's what we've been discussing. But you have this balance policy between federal and province levels. In your opinion, which are the key principles of this fair tax model for extractive industry, and what would be your recommendations to Ukraine for creating this environment that would be attractive for investment and guarantee fair income for the country?
Yeah, very astute questions. Yes, Canada is a federation, and we have to work with our provinces and territories to make sure that their fiscal regime aligns with the federal one. I spoke earlier on about the need for stability and clarity and competitiveness. So these are what inspire our tax policies in Canada. I'm the former Assistant Deputy Minister for Tax Policy for the country, so I know that space a little bit. And it's a conversation that is alive, and the provinces are very aware of the need for them to be tax competitive. So I must say, all in all, we've done a pretty good job, I think, at keeping it aligned and making sure that whatever position that the federal government take is in sync with what the provinces are doing. There's also healthy competition between those. I'm not so familiar in terms of how Ukraine would go about doing this, but I would certainly encourage if the subnational governments were to be involved to keep that dialogue with the central government to make sure that there's alignment, not just on tax, by the way, but also on regulation, and making sure, to the panelists' earlier comments, this whole issue of public acceptance and dialogue with the local population is really, really important. And the central government, of course, can play a role, but I would submit that the subnational governments can play an even greater role in make sure that there's local buy-in.
Тобто, яка рекомендація для України?
So what would be the recommendation for Ukraine?
I'd like to reserve that to the Ukrainian people to manage their own affairs.
Залишити.
Я сподіваюся, що всі, хто почули відповіді від наших
Thank you. I hope that everyone who heard answers from our speakers, possibly you have your own questions. You can raise your hand if you have a question. There is a time to ask these questions. If not, we will finish the panel and we will just say thank you to our panelists. No questions from the audience? Okay, in such case, we will wrap it up. I will just ask you not to leave the room, because without any breaks, there will be another panel for critical resources. So please stay at your places. Thank you.